What does the first part of the Shema say? Hear, O.
Israel.
And what is Israel? Or who is Israel? A nation made of? Tribes made of? Don't be shy, it's people, individuals. Israel is not a unified community. Israel, by definition, is already, right, an entity made of multiple individuals. And if you think for a second that that notion was overlooked or bypassed in early Judaism, you're very, very wrong. I'm going to start it with something by Rabbi Yosef Soloveitchik, who is a modern thinker. And Rabbi Yosef Soloveitchik carries on a voice that comes from way, way earlier, and I show you how earlier voices, some of which may stun you, because you would think that they come from a modern type of Judaism, maybe from Germany in the second half of the 19th century, the birthplace of Reform Judaism, and so on and so forth. I'll take you as early as 3rd century, Mishnaic, early Talmudic periods, and you'll see what they say. But look what Soloveitchik says. There are two types of Kedusha, sanctity, in Jewish life. A communal sanctity, which each individual Jew possesses by virtue of being a member in the Jewish community. And, look at this one, an individual sanctity, which recognizes each Jew as the direct recipient of Kedusha according to her own unique personal endowments, efforts, and achievements. Individual sanctity, he says, adds a personalistic element, a sanctification specific to the individual and unlike that found in anyone else. What do you take from this? Here we are, a bunch of Jews sitting around the same table. What is Soloveitchik actually saying here? And this is not an original Soloveitchik thought. It's a great Soloveitchik summary of earlier thoughts. What is, in fact, individual sanctity? What do you understand here?
Different interpretations.
Different interpretations of what?
Different levels of understanding.
Understanding what?
The mitzvot, the laws.
So you're going straight to Judaism,
Yeah.
to Jewish religion. Let's even unpack. Before we even go to Jewish life, here we are sitting here, a bunch of people, individuals, right? What is Soloveitchik saying is inherent to our condition?
We're different. We're individual. We're different.
We're different. Are we all different?
Yes.
Everybody is equally different from everybody else?
No.
Yes,
Oh, you can measure it. Obviously, you cannot measure it. So yeah, we are all different. If we're all different, we have one thing. We have one thing at least in common.
Right.
What is that?
In that we're all different.
We are
The same.
the same
Communally.
in the fact that we are
All
different. In other words, the one thing we do have in common is that we are all different.
What we also have in common is that we all hold some sanctity, some Kedusha.
No, that's what I'm saying. It's an individual sanctity. Now, I want you to understand individual sanctity. It's not just an individual sanctity, it's the sanctity of individualism. In other words, your individual uniqueness is a sanctified idea. And I'll show you in a minute from the Talmudic literature and the Mishnaic literature how it comes in a beautiful manner. But what I want us to understand, that goes back to what you said earlier, my dear, about theocracy, about theopraxy and orthopraxy and orthodoxy. One of the things we will see here today, starting with Soloveitchik and going backwards, is that we shouldn't make the mistake of misconstruing unity for uniformity. And these are two very, very different things. Because what we can learn right here from the get-go is that one thing that unifies us as human beings is the fact that we have no uniformity in fact. In other words, we are unified by the fact that we are non-uniform. Just like when you look at time, at the property of time.
But where is that non-uniformity? That's the question.
Let's see. In a minute we'll see. And we'll see how it presents itself according to these rabbinic texts. But right now, we're starting from a very interesting premise. Any illusion or illusion to the fact that we're supposed to think the same, aim for the same goals, understand the same things or target the same concept is erroneous from the get-go, because we lack the tools to do so. No one here can think for someone else or like someone else. So this myth is broken right from the get-go. I'm not supposed to think like you, because you know what? The obvious, in my face, I'm not you. So now let's look at some excerpt that explain this, okay?
It's actually the supremely subversive idea. It comes out of a civilization where you get your identity from your family, your tribe, your kingdom that you belong to, etc., etc.
Your God.
Exactly. It's all ascribed. You're born into it, and you have to somehow adapt. And this comes and turns the whole thing upside down. And it's the most modern of ideas. It says that reality really stems from the individual person, and that it's all out there for the individual. It's a fantastically subversive idea.
It is, and it's again, what you call subversive, I would assume that the early rabbis would call enlightened, something that came from God, another element that shows the beauty of God. And I'll show you in the verses how they glorify literally the name of God by this individual sanctity. It is subversive when you compare it now to modern times and you say, this is incredible. The way postmodernism took something like this and turned it into a way of life in the Western world is really mind-boggling. What's important for me is that the seed of such ideas is definitely not in modern time.
The connection is the concept of B'Tselem.
Absolutely. B'Tselem, B'Tzel, being the shadow of, in the image of, and we'll see in a minute also how this uniqueness does not contradict the divine unity. Guys, flip the page. And let's look to the second source from Midrash Rabbah on Bamidbar 14:3. It's immediately, it is written, Moses spoke and God replied with a voice. You see it? This is a Midrash Rabbah, early rabbinic texts that were compiled on books of the Torah, and some of them on different scrolls like Shir HaShirim, Eicha, and others. This is on one of the books of the Pentateuch, of the 5 books of Moses, and it interprets a very interesting interlude or exchange of an exchange between Moses and God on Mount Sinai. And it says there, "Vaydaber Elohim im Moshe ke'achad ha'adam," and God spoke to Moses like a person speaks to another, which is immediately to a monotheistic mind. Remember, by the time we get to rabbis, you remember the first lecture I gave you. By the time we get to the rabbis, we're already monotheistic mind. So the idea of God speaking to a mortal like another person is obviously very disturbing. So they need to unpack this and take out the danger of polytheism, paganism out of it, right? So they immediately have to explain it. What does it mean when it says that God spoke and Moses answered with a voice, and Moses spoke and God answered with a voice? What does it mean God answered with a voice? It sounds so crude. It sounds so anthropomorphic, right? Look what the rabbis here do. It's really a brilliant midrash. It is written Moses spoke and God replied with a voice, rather than God spoke and Moses replied with a voice. Why? Now it responds. Since when God replied to Moses, they say, God used Moses' own voice. Did you follow?
So he spoke through Moses.
He what?
He spoke through Moses?
Let me ask you a question. When Moses stood on Mount Sinai, according to these rabbis, what did Moses hear? His own voice. Coming from where exactly? From? Where did he hear it? In the landscape, in the structure? From the outside? What are other possibilities?
From the inside.
If it says Moses' own voice, what is happening here? Could it be that the Mount Sinai that the rabbis are now trying to work through is not a Mount Sinai that is a physical landscape, but the Mount Sinai of the soul? What Moses is hearing is actually something that happens every human being 10,000 times a day. An enriched monologue, which we sometimes call a dialogue. Hearing myself. Getting into a dialogue or an enriched monologue with myself. I'm amplifying my most incredible desires, my most intimate wants, in a way that brings me closer to my potential.
Rabbi Nachman who understood that really well.
Well,
I mean, in terms of speaking.
Now I'll give you an example. What rabbis do, I don't give you those examples here, but rabbis ask the question, for example, how come that in certain parts of the Torah we find an angelic being or some sort of an intermediary referring to one of the patriarchs and calling them by name twice? Yitzchak, Yitzchak, Avraham, Avraham. Not Abraham or Avraham, Avraham. For example, in Genesis 22, when Abraham holds the knife and is about to put it to Isaac's neck, an angel comes from heaven and says, Avraham, Avraham, al tishlach yadcha el hanav. And some rabbis ask, why twice? Is it because he's deaf? Is it because he was so zealot to cut his son that he wanted, it was a pressing issue? They say no, they can't say something beautiful. They come and say, he heard his own voice calling him from heaven. So one Abraham talked to the other, one Jacob talked to the other. He locked into his divine potentiality. What the rabbis are suggesting here is in many ways a very intimate, profound, personal experience of divinity. Moses is hearing himself understanding the divine. It's not something that is objective, but it is something that is subjective.